joining us now to break it all down is, of course, our guest, Dr. Sinan Ciddi. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Now, Sinan, starting with Gaza, Turkey is opening these mosques. And like I said, one of them is named after Abdullah Azam. We know he's a very controversial figure. How does Ankara's religious influence actually translate into political power on the ground? And what does that ultimately mean for Israel's security calculations?
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw that post or the news item suggesting that they're, of the mosque in question there, I did a double take and I had to check with my sources and our sort of information here just to make sure that this was accurate. And it is. And it really is an unforced error on part of Ankara. I mean, look, they're basically saying that this is a part of, allowing Gazans places to worship during Ramadan. You could do, Turkey could help facilitate prayer areas or even build new mosques in any capacity, but to name it after the mentor of Osama bin Laden, I would just say that's beyond controversial. I mean, that's just downright callous. I mean, there's no excuse for this, and most states try to avoid being designated as state sponsors of terrorism, but Turkey's going all the way in. I mean, there was no need to essentially take this line. And it just reinforces Israeli fears, but not just Israeli fears, Western fears that Turkey is really sort of decoupled from its Western anchor.
Of course, the next question that we have would be about Ethiopia. This is one issue that we're looking at. Obviously, like you said, this kind of brazen, open acceptance of jihadist terrorism. In Ethiopia, Erdogan is now signing agreements amid the conflict with Sudan. Of course, the question is this primarily economic diplomacy, or is Turkey trying to assert a strategic foothold there in relations to the region as a whole that could challenge Israel's regional influence?
I mean, sure, it definitely is challenging Israel's regional influence, but it's also just challenging its safety and security. But I think it also just goes further than that. It really shows the boundaries of Turkey's hegemonic sort of expansion goals throughout the Horn of Africa. We have seen Turkish arms contractors selling weapons to all sorts of regimes across the Sahel region, including many of those who are experienced or who have experienced coups d'etats and are run by horrific warlords. That's one thing, but Turkey doesn't care because that's just a commercial sort of entity. And it's certainly the case in its sort of adventures inside of Sudan, where Turkey has been accused of selling weapons to both sides of the civil war. And it's rather unapologetic. They would just say that, Turkey has an interest in basically commercial arms exports.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really troubling to see what I would suggest, what's happening in Ethiopia as well as Somaliland, Somalia, and Ethiopia. What you're seeing there, I would argue, is Turkey's grooming efforts of, countries in Africa, specifically near the Horn, which have large Muslim populations, where anti-Semitism historically has not really existed. And what Ankara is trying to do is essentially insert itself there and really groom these regimes for the long run, where they can sort of, ratchet up, anti-Semitic sort of sentiments amongst large Muslim majority African populations. And this is very sort of, purposeful on Ankara's part.
Right. Of course, what is the ultimate goal for Turkey in doing this? Why is it so, you could say, insistent on changing the narrative when it comes to Israel and the Jewish population? Obviously, this decision to also drill off of Somalia, on one hand, you could say that it signals this new energy and maritime push, but we also know that Israel just recognized Somaliland, and obviously Somalia is right next door.
I mean, there's multiple components to this, as you suggested, with the mining rights that they've acquired and exploration at the beginning off the coast of Somalia. That's natural gas, energy. They're also interested in rare earth minerals across the different sort of parts that they're striking up relations with on the Horn there. But they've also entered into sort of military basing and training and assistance missions to many Muslim populated African states. We have seen Turkish private military contractors such as Sadat, which is like the Wagner Group of Turkey, really offering sort of premier sort of training and assistance. And Sadat is not a wallflower or just an innocent entity. They literally have on their website that they're interested in enabling sort of the Ummah across many different states. So they have military aspirations, force projection and power projection aspirations in the region, And that's just off the Horn of Africa, which is this sort of triangulating attempt that Turkey has in cornering Israel. Another sort of area is Cyprus and the Greek islands and the Mediterranean.
Well, I think obviously there's a larger issue here, and that is the attempt to challenge other world powers, not just the state of Israel. But that's going to be a conversation for next time, unfortunately. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Ciddi.